But I want to deal with the most controversial aspects of this, and that is, in recent days, most of us, I have concluded, that abuse can be a form of abandonment. Recently, Wayne Grudem wrote a paper that got a lot of publicity, saying that he thought that abuse was a third ground of divorce. And I agree that abuse can be grounds for divorce. And it's actually similar to me to adultery. It doesn't mean the first time anything abusive happens, you go give up. You try to save the marriage. But I think a persistent pattern of oppression can be, rather than saying it's a third ground, which is really on tenuous exegetical grounds, in my opinion, just the language here, that this can be a form of abandoning the marriage, that God has called us to peace, he says in the same verse. And so the husband who makes it unsafe for his wife to live in peace with him, a husband who makes it unsafe for the children, in my view, that can be a form of abandonment. We believe passionately that a wife who is in danger physically has the right to get out. It's been pointed out by many people. Chris Moews has written about this. There's a wonderful book by Darby Strickland that's going to talk about this in terms of understanding abuse. That abuse is not merely blood and broken bones and bruises. There can be horrible oppression emotionally, economically, sexually, that is not necessarily hospitalization. And so I think that, again, I would take not an outburst of anger. One thing I liked about Darby's book was that she says there are things that happen in all marriages in terms of conflict or saying things you shouldn't say or pressuring each other in certain ways that are not a pattern of oppression that you would call abuse. But when there is a persistent pattern of oppression, I think, again, this is where you want your church involved, and you want your church also to understand these things, have them read Darby's book and Chris Moews' book. I think that a persistent pattern of oppression can be a form of abandonment, leading to grounds for divorce. A couple of the things to tie up some loose ends. One of the most typical problems, though, is the person who is abusing is calling himself a believer. He's a member of the church. He could even be an officer in the church. And the verse says, if your unbelieving spouse leaves you, let him leave. But what if your spouse is a church member? And the answer would be that she obviously needs to safely confront him, which may be with other people present, about his sin. And now you're jumping into Matthew 18 in terms of the process potentially of church discipline. And a man who continues in a pattern of coercion and oppression and abuse, who will not repent, the final stage of church discipline would be you put him out, which is you consider him an unbeliever, in which case this verse would apply. And now, at least in terms of the church, God alone knows the heart, but the church has disciplined him. Matthew 18 says, who you bind on earth has been bound in heaven. And so she would be authorized to divorce him on the grounds of abandonment through abuse.